I thought before I take you into individual cross analysis this afternoon, which I'm sure will have its own frequency for you. And after telling you how terribly impersonal your cross is, so as not to depress you entirely, I will take you through something that'll put it into a nice, fresh spirit for you. A number of years ago, I taught a course over about 25 weeks that was called Quarter by Quarter, The Faces of the Godhead. And I still think that it's probably the most profound thing I ever did in human design. For me, any of you that can gain access to that, it's available. It's an incredible thing. And it's really about taking a deep, deep look at the general structure itself, but deconstructing the mystical. One of the goals that I had out of that work of doing the Faces of the Godhead was to really show the synthesis that's possible for a nine-centered being. Because if you look around this Godhead, what you're looking at here is the relationship between mythical Godheads through various sections of the wheel. Now, I've got to take you back. Let's see if I can do this. To here and give you a sense of how this works. The wheel can be broken up in many ways. And one of the key ways to recognize the nature of the mandala, and by the way, if you've never done it, do it. Just sit one day and stare at this mandala. Because truly, it is one of the most fantastic things. I still have in my office at home, I have a big big wheel framed, and I still catch myself, really, in all innocence, sitting there sometimes in my chair and staring at this thing and just shaking my head. It's so perfect. It's so beautiful. And when you look at it as a mechanism, you really get to see the magic that is there in this whole structure. First of all, the G center. The G center is, literally where everything is held together. And it's where everything is held together in the personal sense. That is the magnetic monopole that sits here in your sternum that holds you together in the illusion of your separateness. But here you can see something else. It is through the G center that the whole construct of the programming is all focused. Everything flows out of that G center and back in to give us a universal identity. And when you look at the G center and you look at its 8 gates, you can see these 8 gates in yellow going all the way around. And if you look at them, we're looking at 2 crosses. We're looking at the cross of the vessel of love. So you have the 25th gate on this side going over to the 46. You have the 10 above and the 15 below. So you have the vessel of love, and then you have the Sphinx in between, the 13 in Aquarius down here to the 7 in Leo, and the 2 in Taurus up here to the 1 in Scorpio. In other words, the wheel divides perfectly into these 8 sections. Now, each gate that is colored in, these are the lead gates of what is in fact a whole family of information. And the way you can see that is by the chop itself. Nothing more fascinating than the structure of the hexagram. 6 lines. So go down here with me to Taurus and go down here to the 2nd gate. You will see that the 2nd gate, if you look at the structure, it has 6 yin lines, 6 broken lines. And if you go to the other end, its opposition, exactly opposite, you get to the 1st gate, you get to 6 yang lines. In other words, if you go across the wheel, wherever you look, you're going to see a mirror, an exact mirror. It's really something to understand this mechanism. Wherever you look, as you move your polarity, you're going to see an exact mirror. There's something else as well. The wheel is divided, first of all, into 2 parts. Right? It's the first thing you can do with this wheel is that you can divide it in half. And if you divide it in half, you'll see that the way that you do that is that if you go here to the second gate and you go to the bottom of the hexagram structure, all hexagrams, the first line is at the very bottom, the sixth line is at the top. If you look here at the very bottom of the second, you'll see that it's a yin line, just the bottom line. And if you go all the way around until you get up here to the 1, then you'll see that from the 1 onwards, all the bottom lines are yang. In other words, if you look at just the bottom lines, you can see the wheel split in two, the yin side and the yang side. Now, if you want to split the wheel in 4, then you go to the first 2 lines. And the first 2 lines, so for example, if you look at the 13th gate here, and you see the 13th gate, the bottom line is yang, and the second line is yin. If you follow all the way down here to just before the 2 to the 24, you'll see that this section that includes 16 gates, they all have a bottom yang, and the next line is yin. Those 16 gates are called a quarter. A quarter. From the 13 over here, going all the way down to the 24, this is the quarter of initiation. And it has 16 gates, and you can tell all these gates belong together because they all have the same bottom 2 lines. So you can divide the wheel into 4 parts by just looking at the bottom 2 lines. Now, if you want to divide the quarter into its 4 natural parts, you do the bottom 3 lines. So let me show you. That same 13, where we saw that the yang yin, the bottom going up, yang bottom, then yin, will go all the way down to the 24. So you see the structure, they're all the same. But if you look at the bottom 3, you'll see it goes yang, yin, yang, and you'll see that's exactly the same until the 36th gate. 8 gates in a row. Okay, those 8 gates in a row, they're going to have the same third line. And then you can break it down again. In other words, basically what you can do by following the structure of the hexagram is you can divide the wheel into its natural components. And the natural components are quarters of quarters. There's 16 of them. Hey, we've got 64 in wheel, so we've got 16 quarters of quarters. And each of those 16, they represent a genetic influence on our consciousness. Not just on our physical programming, but our consciousness. So when you move to here, what you're getting to see is each of these quarter of quarters. In other words, you're getting to see the 16 divisions. And if you look here, for example, in what is the quarter of initiation that goes from the 13th gate down to the 24, you can see 4 quarters in here. Kali, Mitra, Michael, and Janus. In other words, 4 different godheads in that quarter of initiation. Now, these names, by the way, I had the potential of selecting up to, anything from 20 to 40 different gods for each of these 16 positions. Now, I tended to take ones that mythologically had the most power. But in fact, these are commonalities that we need to see. That is, if you look at the Godhead as it's structured in the cultures, there is approximately 2,500 to 3,000 known gods. I mean, that's a crowd, eh? And if you go from culture to culture, basically what you get to see is that, you have thematics that repeat themselves. Thor and Jupiter, they're lightning gods, this kind of thing where you get thematics that unify these forces. So basically, these 16 gods or goddesses that are configured here in this wheel, they're sort of like... they're the ones that do the advertising. They're the ones that really stand out. I mean, they're the ones that, people are going to recognize. They carry the brand name. If you're going to have a quarter that's called Kali, that's a really good brand name. I mean, it's strong. People recognize it. The other thing is that when I was selecting the Godheads, I wanted to pull them. I could actually have done all 16 from any culture. I mean, other than the monotheistic cultures, because of course then it's a dilemma, then you have to go into saints and all this kind of stuff and blah, 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 and angels and whatever. It's not as interesting as Hindu Brahmins and the Egyptians. They had full panoplies of gods. You know, what I tried to show was how you can integrate the whole cross-section of religious and spiritual thought and organize it into the mandala. So again, if I thought that the Roman version was better than the Egyptian version as a kind of poster child for that quarter, you know, I would take that version. So, and again, as I went through this in the course study, I talk about the various different variations of gods or goddesses that could have been used, you know, that were secondary choices, if you will. But anyway, the 16 Godheads represent the 16 original bundles. This is where everybody comes from. This is where everybody's personality crystal comes from. So each and every one of us, you know, we originated in one of these zones. This is what it's really all about. And it's not just a matter that, you know, as I put it on the mundane plane about the nature of your cross, that, you know, you're given this responsibility and it's not personal, it's for the other and all that stuff. The fact is that you are born with this genetically imprinted in you in a very deep way. And where it's the deepest is your personality sun, wherever your personality sun happens to be. For me, it's in the quarter that is ruled by Michael, as an example. You know, and I thought that was really funny because it must have been very, very early. I think it was 1993, and I did one of the very few, you know, New Age conference-y kind of things. And me and my associate, we had a small booth. I think it was in Hamburg or one of these places. And there was some, she was a palm reader, palmist, sort of kitty corner to our booth, who was fascinated by what we were doing, and every once in a while would come over and grab some information. And on the last day, she said to me, "Please, let me look at your hand," you know, one of those things. And you know, be nice, yeah, okay. And she had bought a book. I mean, come on, in those days, if you bought a book, I'd kiss your feet, you know. It was like, wow, really? You bought a book? Okay, here's my hand. And she said, "You're deeply connected to the Archangel Michael." And I looked at her and I thought, oh, is this bitch crazy? You know? She was pretty good. Yeah. She was pretty good. You know, life will do that to you. So, you know, in order to put back some gloss into your Incarnation Cross, if you look at your personality, if you look where your personality is, your personality sun, you're really looking at the main imprint. In other words, this is really what you're here to serve. And of course, that's something that is really complex, because it is not just simply that you're here to serve that Godhead, and please don't misunderstand that. You know, don't get into Kali worship and all that shit because your son happens to be there. It really is about a broader philosophical frame that is actually there in you to be released. I mean, each and every one of these Godheads represent different ways in which we deal with the nature of consciousness and the way in which the world is perceived, and, you know, all kinds of things that are there. It actually is something that is very deep. But at the same time, there is something very important about your personality being aware of this. Your personality taking this in. Because these thematics are something that are essential. We need to be able to bring that Godhead together. I mean, after all, this is what it's about. It's not about these individual factions that have always been there in isolation. You know, my God's better than your God and blah, 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 all that stuff. Instead of seeing that in the truest sense of the cliche, the gods live through us. I mean, through us. I mean, it's not like they're alive in that sense. They're alive through us. And we form a union. You know, those of us that come from different bundles, in fact, carry a whole different angle, if you will, process than others. Because it's framed by the responsibilities that are inherent coming out of that area of the consciousness field. See, for me, this is one of the places where you both get to deconstruct and demystify the Godhead, and at the same time make it even more incredible, because it really is. I mean, yes, it is alive. It's alive in all of us. Not only that, but when you're looking at, which is one of the themes of Quarter by Quarter, is that not only here are you looking at it in the context of the mystical, if you will, or the spiritual, that there is this Godhead there, but that Godhead represents 4 hexagrams that are part of your genetic code. I mean, they're in your body. It's not, it's not an abstract. I mean, it's one of those things really to get. And of course, we don't just get one. Wherever your positions are, you're coming out of these force fields. We're here to integrate and synthesize this into a consciousness field, not separate them. That's the learning process. When we started off as primitive beings and we began to connect to the sky and we began to draw lines and make up stories and, all of these things, slowly but surely we were beginning to open up all of the information that was coming from these different zones. They're not here on Earth. I mean, it's also something to understand about the nature of the wheel. I mean, one of the things that I love, come over here, this side of the wheel, to Minerva, and to part of the Christ consciousness field. You've got 7 gates there. 7 gates that begin with the 46 gate here, and the next 7 gates, and they're all in the spleen. Every single one of those 7 gates. Why the 46 is the gate of the love of the body? Because it is the lead hexagram of the 7 gates of the spleen. Yet the 7 gates of the spleen, that the field of neutrino information comes from what we call Scorpio. I mean, it's not here. It's out there. It's coming this way. I mean, we are taking in this information from the outside and it's being filtered through the personality consciousness field. The whole neutrino ocean is coming through the bundles, is coming through the crystal field of consciousness. It's from the outside. And it's one of the things we forget. Love's not here and fear's not here. It arrives. We take it through and process it every day as breath. It's coming from the outside. And we are always under the influence of these consciousness forces, and they are imprinting us at a physical level. Think about a transit. Any day, every single one of those gates are carrying imprints that are related to consciousness field, that are genetic imprints that go into us, and the daily transit is something that we translate only at the personality level. And there we are, caught up in this thinking. The Godhead is very much a part of our lives. It's very much a part of the manipulation of consciousness. See, look, other than my responsibility of introducing the mechanics of human design, the thing that I consider the most important thing that I do is teach people that everything is conditioning. Everything. Everything. This is beautiful, but it's a conditioning field. I mean, it's a conditioning field. It's conditioning personality consciousness. If your personality consciousness is distorted, then what do you do with that field of energy and that information that's constantly flowing through? The beauty of the construct is that we have to be correct in order to get the best out of it. Otherwise, we don't. Because all of the things that are there in the Godhead can be distorted, as we well know, into some of the most ugly things that we have on this planet. I mean, more death is the result of religion than anything else we've ever known. I mean, anything else. The belief in God has caused more killing than anything else in our history. So until we get to a point that, we understand that these forces are not in competition with each other. They're not. They're here to be synthesized in the life. This is what's so beautiful when you see the illustration of the body graph in the wheel. There's nothing more beautiful than that. Because when you see the body graph in the wheel, you see that the outside is integrated into the holistic phenomena of the single life. The Godhead lives in us to varying degrees. Obviously you don't touch everything. We each have our formulas of, what are the main influencing forces. But what is really a key is to grasp that your personality sun sets you in a place in which there is a deep overriding keynote. And this is what these quarters are. The quarter of initiation, the quarter of civilization, the quarter of duality, and the quarter of mutation. Each and every one of these quarters, they represent one of the primal areas because it's the first split after the binary. You know, you got the half and half business, yin yang. Okay, yin yang. Okay, yin yang. You know, we know that. That's up and down and in and out and over and under, yin yang, yin yang. Okay, that's the basis of everything. And you can see that in the bottom lines. That's the whole story, yin yang. But the moment that you get complex, the moment that the 2 becomes 4, before the 4 becomes 16, you know, and then you get 64 and you got the movie, you know, the moment that the 2 gets to the 4, this is where you set the foundation of the physical world, the real world. You only get that out of a 4. You know, the this and that, you know, is just the tension field. But the stability, the reality of the world, it arises out of the 4. And the moment that you get the 4, you get the basic construct. It starts over here with initiation. Initiation is the incarnation of mind. It's mind. You know, this is the thematic of mind. Anybody born with their personality sun in the quarter of initiation, there is enormous pressure on their mental development because it's about mind at its core. It actually is about consciousness coming into the world. You know, there's a great deal of innocence in initiation. It is the new, you know, it is the consciousness that is unfolding. And yet consciousness in and of itself has nowhere to go. The only place that it can go is civilization, because civilization represents the evolution of form. It is from the consciousness incarnating and then into the form. It's this civilization that sets the foundation for all of our development, all of it. I mean, one of the most fascinating things about the quarter of civilization is that if you look at the throat center, the throat center is the center in the body graph that has the most potential. Say it has 11 potential gates. Every single one of those 11 gates, the throat center of manifestation, of articulation, of truly being able to do something in the world, all of them are here in civilization. All of them. Civilization is the building of the world. And it's something to understand about our movement in space. We are moving away from civilization. If you could imagine our solar system, you know, the Earth and the Sun and all the planets in our galaxy, in terms of the way we're moving in the galaxy, we're moving away from civilization and we're moving towards mutation. We're actually moving towards a star called Vega, moving towards mutation. And basically what that means is that all the constructs of the foundation of our form principle, we're moving further and further away from it, literally until it will disappear. It's why when you look at civilization, these are beings that hold on to the traditions of the past. They are the ones that keep the continuity of the form principle. They are the ones that have always paid the price of insisting that the form principle has to be looked after. Because without the form principle, it doesn't matter what the consciousness is. And you get this first 2 steps in the understanding of the development of a human being. You know, it is the whole importance of incarnation is to establish mind. Yet mind in and of itself cannot exist without a framework. The framework has to be there. You can have a wonderful computer program, but if there's no computer to put it into, what does it mean? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it is really something to understand about the nature of what we are as beings. The consciousness comes into form. It's only in the form that it is able to express itself. But there's more. There's more because you can see that the third quarter is called duality. And duality says, oh, we don't do it alone. We don't do it alone because if we do it alone, we're going to be over before we start. You know, so we cannot do it alone. We have to make more. We have to live with each other. We've got to bring the yin and the yang together. We have to do so in order to recreate life. So the recreation of life, the bonding for the continuity of life, all comes out of the quarter of dualities. Think about it. Consciousness arriving, forced into form, forced to bond. I mean, it's a mechanism. Eh? And then you get around to the other side. That's why you've got Christ over there and Harmonia. They're all sort of like saying, look, we got to love each other. Everything's okay. Don't worry. It's all right, really, really. And there's going to be a reward after. God's going to send you to heaven, It's not that bad, really, But anyway, yeah. And then you get to mutation. You get to the top of this process, and really you get to what it's all about. Mutation is preparation for death. That's preparation for death. This is where supposedly you get your chops together. It's like, I'm going to die. Okay, I got to figure this all out, before I go, because I really want to come back, because it's a wheel after all. I mean, by the time you get to mutation, you've gone through the whole process, right? The little baby, there's the consciousness, trying to organize it in form. You get through that whole thing. You finally get mature enough. You get yourself a partner. You create a family. You go through your life. You get to mutation. It's all over. And you look and you say, oh, Jesus, what was this about? This couldn't have been for just this. Wasn't something else supposed to happen along the way? I mean, this is what mutation is all about. People who are born in the cross of mutation, in the quarter of mutation, there's always this at the back of their mind. They're 7 years old and they're going, Jesus, I got to get something done before I die. Because I don't want to live my life like that. I need some help. Because it's a reality. These are very deep, very, very deep themes that are in it, and it's just the wheel. You come in, you figure out how to be here. You go through the process of being whatever we are, which is, reproductive mammals. You get to the end of the story. You kiss everything goodbye, and you hope that you come around the next time, to come back again. It's just a program. It's what the Tibetans love to call the wheel. As a matter of fact, you can see here the Tibetan wheel, the keepers of the wheel. This is one of the themes in mutation. The wheel turns, this is the last quarter of the quarter. The wheel is just going to turn and it's just going to be the next one. If you leave this plane correctly, so that you can come back into this mechanism and again go around in this story. And that you can see that in understanding this as a flow in the wheel, as a spiral ultimately, you also get to see that each and every one of these Godheads, each of these quarters, that they have a specific dynamic in the progression of this wheel. Which means that each and every one of us, in our role of having an Incarnation Cross, and where our personality sons are, that we are also part of this flow. And that we are here through our crosses to connect to the themes that we are intended to meet and blend. Because after all, the cross with its 4 arms is there to blend the thematics that it touches and bring it out through the theme of its personality son. It's not like it ignores the rest. It's all programming after all. It says that we are here to be different. We are not here to be blinded to the cultural illusion that there is this one force that is there for us only. To understand that we are connected, inherently connected to the Godhead. I mean, if you go back to my understanding of the ancient Greeks, and there have been a lot of speculation about all of that, and you can see it in their earliest theater. They believed that every word they spoke was an expression of the Godhead. I mean, they accepted that they were simply an instrument of the Godhead. That's all. And they had divided their Godhead, because you can do that with the Greek Godhead. You can fill out this 16 rather easily with the Greek Godhead. They really believed that they were expressing the words of the gods. There is a moment in which the vanity of seven-centered consciousness took over, and the gods became something that you formalized the conversation to, but they weren't speaking through you anymore. The reality is they do speak through us. They do. There are these profound conditioning forces that are there with us all the time. All the time. And to understand that we are under the influence right now of civilization. You know, the personality sun, this is where it is. It's in this quarter. If you're following transits, to see the nature of the movement within the quarters is very important, because you're getting to see the overall themes that are affecting the planet. You know, this is a time where the form principle and what's happening to civilization is a big theme. So, you know, you've got this gusher that's going on in the Gulf, and, you know, these various kinds of things in which the form principle is something that dominates. One of the things to recognize is, as we move further and further every moment away from civilization, that the power of civilization to hold it to its laws begins to break down. In other words, the way we're manifesting out of civilization is changing. But to see what we are, you know, to see that we are representative. So to look at your Incarnation Cross in an impersonal way is important, because of the need to see that it is there for you as what you're here to provide to the other, what you're here to give the consciousness field. But on the other hand, you also have to see where you come from, what you're here to serve in terms of where you are in the way in which this construct operates. And by the way, for those of you, you know, no one's expecting you to be familiar with the details of any of these gods or goddesses. But if your personality sun is going to be in one of these quarters and you don't know, please Google, you know, and just check it out. Because you'll see that that's a very powerful experience, to see the thematics that are involved in that Godhead, and to realize how much of that is already a part of your life. I mean, how much of that is already in you, because it is. And again, that gives you another way of connecting to what is a larger process. I mean, after all, you know, to be able to live your unique life is a way to make the most profound collective contribution. You know, that's the duality. That's the irony on the other side. You know, we're desperately in need of unique awareness. We need that. Otherwise, you know, we're simply blinded by the not-self world. And that unique awareness, you know, is living here. Everything about your cross, everything about your profile, everything about your sun earth is about the potential that is there in your awareness. What's possible. And to see the Godhead in perspective, to see your connection to it. I mean, tomorrow in the lecture period, I will take you in detail through the quarters. Okay? So I will give you a chance to see each of the aspects so that you can have a better connection to them in terms of looking at them in relationship to your own design. But these themes, where do you come from? What quarter do you come from? You know, it's one of many years ago. I've lost this. I don't know who has it, but somebody in the human design world from my early years must have this recording. I did a course in Gießen in Bavaria. I think it was in 94, 95, maybe later. Anyway, it was called the Four Quarters. And I felt it was really important for people to understand, analysts, because I had originally introduced it only for analysts, that analysts understand where somebody stands in terms of the quarters, because it's so important to understanding the overall chart. I mean, somebody who has their personality sun in initiation is very different from somebody who has their personality sun in duality. I mean, they're really different. You know, the underlying influences that are there, the underlying conditioning forces that are there, no matter how similar their physical design would be, there's always going to be that element that makes them very different. Always that element that makes the initiation more cerebral in that sense, you know, and the duality more concerned with their interrelationships. Those are going to be themes that you cannot, you know, you won't miss. So it's one of those things that when you see the quarter that you're coming out of, you also get to see the larger purpose. Think about the incarnative process. I mean, I'm here with my personality sun and initiation. I'm really here at the very, very beginning of a cycle. I mean, I'm not like somebody who has their sun in civilization, which is another step in this wheel, or somebody in duality, or somebody in mutation. In other words, there are certain limitations, of me being in initiation. They just are. Each of us have these limitations that are rooted in the quarter that we incarnated from. And at the same time, we are forced, in a sense, to not be able to get out of that, if I can put it that way. In other words, duality was never going to be the thing for me, even though it's at the other end of my sun. It's my earth. I'm aware of it. I know it's over there. So as a clarion, I could do a good job teaching people about partnership and connections and all of that stuff. And I have an arm of my cross that's in civilization, and I have one that's in mutation. So I do have a way of connecting to those elements, but the theme is where the personality sun is. That personality sun in initiation, that sets the tone of what is really going to be there. It's interesting in my family, because we have all 4 quarters. You get to watch these things in, the way your life works, the people that you connect to. I mean, pay attention to those people in your life just by the quarter. I mean, just by the quarter. Because you'll see it's really interesting. Because you'll get to notice that you have certain affinities to certain quarters and not to others. I mean, there are natural things. Again, it goes back to, we're here to commune, yet we're not here to commune to those who don't want to hear us, don't want to listen to us, don't connect to what we're here to speak about. We have natural allies that are there for us. If you're in the quarter of mutation and you happen to be in the Hades quarter of a quarter, and somebody is in Prometheus, which is beside you, you have a much closer connection to them than you do to somebody who's on the other side of the wheel. Because you're part of the same general genetic influencing. And you can never separate this from the genetics. I mean, that's the thing that's so fascinating. These are imprints in us. The Godhead lives in us. All of these things. It allows us, if we're correct, to express our consciousness out of our unique position, and at the same time be connected to the process, be connected to the other. Get the message across. Okay, let's have our lunch break, and when we come back, I will do some cross analysis.